Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. So picture this, a young man in 1950s Mississippi working at a print shop, watching stories come to life through ink and paper. Now we're going to fast forward 2 decades, and that same person is standing in a packed stadium in Lagos, Nigeria, camera in hand, documenting what would become one of the most significant cultural gatherings in modern history. I recently sat down with photographer Roy Lewis, who you're going to hear on this episode. Roy's unconventional path challenges everything we think we know about artistic education. In a world where Black stories and images mattered, Ebony and Jet magazine was the perfect place for him to explore spaces where he could thrive artistically. And, sometimes the most profound and creative education that we can get is on the job. Roy currently lives on the East Coast, but he was generous enough to sit down with me on the phone to talk about his life, to talk about how he has really fine tuned his creative eye, as well as give us the lowdown on what it was like to actually attend Festac 1977. Now, if you managed to catch our episode on Festac 1977, we go a lot deeper in this conversation with Roy Lewis. I'm so excited for you to listen to Roy because you'll learn so much more, particularly about the people who have laid the foundation for us to be thriving as artists and creatives in this modern age. This conversation reminds us that artistry thrives not only in school halls in terms of us learning how to become an artist, but it also thrives in learning on the go, in learning through trial and error, and learning at the hands of life experience. Enjoyed this episode with Roy Lewis. I learned a lot in terms of some tips and tricks that I can apply to my creative career as a photographer. I hope that there are a few nuggets that you'll be able to pick up and apply to your own artistry and to your own creative life. I'm so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. Lewis, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much for making some time to chat with me.
All right.
Okay. So first, as we start out, the first question I have for you is about your first memories as a young boy around creativity or around art. Do you remember when you first thought, oh, I think I could potentially be an artist?
Well, I don't. I didn't think of myself being an artist. When I first started taking pictures, which was in the 50s, in Natchez, Mississippi, where I grew up. In high school, working at a print shop and that published a newspaper, and the editor, Bill Williams, was a photographer, writer, and editor of the newspaper in Natchez, Mississippi. Name of the paper was the New Natchez Leader, which has now become Bluff City Post, so it's still functioning. But I was someone there learning the trade, which was printing. I mean, I selected printing. They had sort of a vocational training aspect in our high school where you could select a craft or a trade, and I selected printing. And so that would be my first. Not that I didn't think of creating things before that, because I always had a great imagination, which is, I think, one of the aspects of creativity is having an imagination. and being able to, visualize things that you're thinking about. And so in that environment around a newspaper where we're doing printing and doing posters and flyers and invitations and tickets and cars, all that is creative environment. And then the newspaper, we put publishing a newspaper every week, which I later became like a distribution person and also was a paper boy. So I think probably the first, when you're dealing with newspapers, dealing with news, that's, you're in the arts, you're in the praying arts, you're in the distribution arts, you're around creativity, writers, photographers, editors. So I think that newspaper, being involved with that newspaper would be like my first being involved in the creative community.
I read that you purchased your first camera at the age of 25. Can you tell me the story of how you came to decide on purchasing your first camera?
I purchased my first camera when I was in high school. It was a Brownie, and sent the film off to Kodak, and got the pictures back, and that Kodak was, like, was with me all the time, and taking pictures of student activities, a trip that we went on to Tuskegee and Talladega, and I actually took pictures of the trip. And so that was like my first involvement with actually taking pictures of a group over a period of, say, 3 or 4 days. It was like my first assignment. The thing you're talking about is when I was in the service, I bought a $25 camera from another soldier who had just came back from Korea. And so that was my first 35 millimeter professional camera.
So, as a freelance photographer, you worked for publications like Jet, Ebony. Can you tell me how you went about creating those relationships in order to sustain a career as a freelance photographer?
Well, opportunity working, in a publication, like working at the newspaper, exposed me to Bill Williams and editors and writers. You're in the environment of creativity. That's, newspaper publication. And so being in the service of having a camera to take pictures of the other soldiers, take pictures of my environment where I was in Texas, San Antonio, Texas. Uh, these are opportunities that, if you have a camera and you're taking pictures of people and you're selling those pictures to those people, i.e. the soldiers, then, and you leave the army, you go back to my job at Johnson Publishing Company, where they have magazines, they have publications, and they have writers. And so that being back in that environment allowed me to be able to take photos and practice, the craft of photography. And so I was able to be in that environment, which, as you know, the environment that you're in as a podcast, as a writer, if you have the tools to do that, if you have the equipment to do that, then that helps. Me being at Johnson Publishing Company, where I had the opportunities to work and accept assignments and, go out and shoot photos and submit them to Zet magazine, to Ebony magazine later, where you're getting pictures published and on a regular basis. You're getting pictures published. You're not a photographer. I wasn't a photographer for Johnson, but I did do assignments for them, and I worked in the subscription department, dealing with data and subscriptions, the magazine subscription, promoting the magazine. These are the kind of things that I did at Johnson I worked for Johnson Publishing Company like 15 years.
That must have been quite a time. Um, Because I think in so many ways that was kind of the height of Jet magazine and Ebony in terms of being where, Black Americans went to get their news and to get, information about, like, about the culture. I wonder if that was exciting, or did you feel like you were participating in something.
You wonder that is exciting. Can you imagine being at the top of this is, I was hired when I was just 19 years old, right out of high school. So, exciting. I mean, there was a little more than that. I mean, it was a job that I was working at and learning. I tell the story that, basically it was where I went to college. I mean, I did attend other schools and, I went to junior college and then later finished in Antioch. But being in that environment, that's why I keep mentioning environment when you're around art being created, around stories being created, around magazines being published on a regular basis, then, you're seeing all aspects of publications on a regular basis. So that's, for me, it's like a university. I used to tell Mrs. Johnson that when I was talking to people, I told them that I went to school at Johnson Publishing Company University, at JPC University, which for me, that's what it was like. These people who were practicing their trade every day on a regular basis.
Wow, that's wonderful training, isn't it? Alright. I guess, the next question I have for you is about how you've built, you created or found your voice as a photographer. Um, because, I mean, it's different for everyone. Some people, they have it from day one, right? But then for some other people, they really have to they do it through, iteration, and I wonder how your experience has been.
My experience has been getting the opportunity to work, be hired by Mr. Johnson because my godmother taught him in high school, and having the opportunity to be in an environment where I'm learning as I go and being around other professional photographers and writers and artists, being able to see them do their craft. And I'm learning from them and getting critiques from photographers and someone who helped me with processing my work and analyzing my work and giving me advice on my work. I am studying with a photographer for a series of classes for 6 months or 9 months or a year with other photographers and learning from each other in that environment. I didn't go to school officially, take classes for photography, but I learned by doing it and by getting the opportunity to do it for Jet, for Ebony, and the editors giving me their input on do this, do that, we want this, you can do that. And so that's like every day, every assignment is a class. And I was fortunate enough to have my work published in Jet first, and then Negro Digest, and then Ebony. And so having those uh, landmarks or those important publications in our community was the best way. Sometimes you go and you learn your trade or your craft, and then you get chance and opportunity later to practice it or to have it published. That process for me was an ongoing process as I was learning.
That sounds like a really great way of learning. I was talking with someone else, who is an interior designer, and she's a Black interior designer. And I asked her, so I read in your bio, in terms of all the interviews that she's done, everyone says that she's self taught. She's self taught. And she says, no, I'm not self taught. I'm taught by experience. And I feel like in so many ways, that's what you were just telling us, that it's through experience and interactions and through iteration that you have become, the notable photographer that you are.
Right. Yeah, it's a great opportunity, and I'm very fortunate. This don't just happen. it's, you have to have the opportunity. You have to have someone who believes in your work, and that I got a lot of encouragement, a lot of encouraging. And so I was able to take advantage of that opportunity, and it helped my career. It helped me become a stronger photographer, a stronger person. A lot of times, as you know, when you have work to do that you like to do, it influences your life.
Mm, it really does. All right. So at this point, I'd love for us to turn our attention to Festac. So we are almost 50 years, almost about to celebrate 50 years since Festac 77. And so you participated, you attended Festac, and you were there for nearly a month in January to February of 77. So we know that Festac is the largest Pan-African festival of its kind, and it brought together about 17,000 artists, performers, intellectuals, and we had about 55 African and diaspora nations who attended. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did when you were at Festac, and what are some of your memories from that festival?
Well, first, you didn't just go. There was a selection process in each country. A lot of the countries probably sent delegations that was what they did. I mean, they performed. That was their either troops for that country. But in America, you had to literally you submit work, and you was there with an evaluation and the selection process where you had to submit work. And so I submitted a couple of photos. I had a couple of photos. One was uh, during a trip with my daughter in the West Indies. Another one was a banjo player in New Orleans who were very famous. And so those two pictures went for the exhibition. Of course, Festac was dealt with overall cultural aspect of our being here in America and what we've created here as some of the things that we as a people who have been here for 500 years, 600 years, and who have blended a lot of the different cultures, some different aspects from other places. And we went as the U.S. Zone, U.S. African American zone culture, just like Cubans and people from Australia. They came representing their countries, and we basically, because the State Department didn't really sanction, it was something that they wanted to do the way they wanted to do it. Well, that's not the way it happened. So we went as artists and musicians and poets and writers. Festac, as you know, itself was a comprehensive teach dealing with all aspects of culture, colloquium and architectural stuff, music, dance, drama. There were three venues in Lagos, Nigeria, that had sports hall. You had a Talawafa Abeba Square, and then you had National Theater. And so all these places, every day that we were there, things were going on at these different places. And so my participation was because I was a photographer for Festac, or for the North American Zone, was to photograph these events. Participants, our participants in the events. That's what we had on our badge, participants. And so since I was with the press, I got a red press badge, which gave me full access. And so we covered, our performances, but we also covered other countries' performances at these different locations. And, it was like an Olympic setup. We had housing for each country, had their own buildings, own transportation, buses, vans, and cars. And so, my job was to move from different places, from different events and photograph these events. opening day, which was spectacular. Everybody in the stadium was packed. It was people from all over the world, but primarily people in Nigeria or Lagos. A lot of people did come from different spots. I think it was about 500 of us, of just our group alone. 2 planes, one first plane came over first day. We had opening, and then second plane came over. The first group got on that plane and went back to second plane. People stayed, and so we were every day. It was the crack being around your people from other countries. That's the other thing. Even though we didn't speak each other's language, we kind of got a dance for. Of course, they would figure out a way to talk to each other. Same thing with photographers and cinematographers and musicians. You know. So anyway, we assembled. We went around the stadium, assembled in the middle of the field, just like you do with the Olympics. You had to sign. Each country signed, and that happened opening day and closing day. And so between that, I got an opportunity to go to the Durbar in the north part of Kaduna and photograph that. A lot of the people didn't get a chance to go up because, go up there was a good ways away. It was a good ways away. And so anyway, it was just great. I mean, it's one of the greatest experience. It's one of the greatest experience I've ever experienced. I mean, it's one of the highlights of my career as a photographer, as someone interested in culture, not just our culture, major culture. I mean, this was like the top. I mean, it was the top of everything. If we weren't to talk about, I'm sure that there are pictures, there are books being produced. As a matter of fact, there's a book that I don't know whether you ordered that book when you were at that opening at Expo Chicago. It's available on Festac. There are other books available. Mel and Nash have one. So there are books around. The Ebony magazine did a special issue on Festac. Ozir Muhammad did the cover. I did photographs in there. He did photographs in there. So, and then I put together a slide presentation that I selected slides from some of the other photographers who went, and we did a tour. The North American Zone directors, two or three of us, we went around the country, reported to the different zones. We did slide presentations to show what went on to different audiences around the country: LA, Chicago, DC, New York. And so that's, it was one of those events that didn't get the kind of publicity in America as it got in other countries. There's that book that was put out by South African and British group. That's available, I think, on Amazon. It's just called, I think, Festac. I'm sure it's available. I'm fairly certain it's still available.
That sounds like it must have been just full of joy and just being around like-minded people too. There's a sense of connection that brings, and I can imagine how that would have been the highlight of your career, as you mentioned. I can only imagine. They say if I could time travel, I would say I think that's certainly something I would an event I would like to time travel to. Must have been wonderful. Well, we have come to our time together. Mr. Lewis, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate this conversation, and I absolutely loved meeting you at Expo Chicago. That was quite interesting how that experience went for me. I was leaving when I ran into you, and you've definitely charmed me into coming to look at your exhibit, and I had a wonderful time, and as well as an awakening. So I want to thank you so much for your time, as well as for the dedication that you have to your work.
I'm glad that you had a good time, and hope that the show help, and especially during this period of Juneteenth coming up tomorrow. And so for us to be talking about one of the great historic pieces going on, paying tribute to our historic and, this important date that was important in our history in America. So to be a part of it, I appreciate you interviewing me and me being able to give some of my impressions on Festac and my work. And so I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Hi there. I have a quick favor to ask you before you go. If you're loving the show, would you mind taking a quick second to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite go-to podcast app? Here's the thing. Those reviews are like magic fairy dust. They help other creatives of color discover our show and tap into their own artistic superpowers. While you're at it, why not subscribe to our Substack newsletter, Creative Matters? Creative Matters is like a weekly dose of inspiration delivered straight to your inbox. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes. All right, that's all that I have for you today. I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Bye.